Today we're going to talk about the Republicans finally being forced on defense after their war on women's reproductive rights backfires spectacularly on them. And I interview PAC attorney Joe Birkenstock to discuss whether it's permissible for Trump's PAC to spend money on legal expenses and whether he has an obligation to disclose how the funds are going to be used when soliciting donations. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So Republicans are now on the defensive to a degree that I really haven't seen since Dobbs was first handed down. The quick rundown here is that the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos created and stored for in vitro fertilization, IVF, are now considered human beings under a state law, which would then open up IVF clinics to lawsuits for wrongful death of those children if, for example, an embryo is mishandled. And so, to avoid liability, like to avoid manslaughter or homicide lawsuits, fertility clinics have now stopped treatments, and people that relied on IVF to build their families now can't. And let's be perfectly clear, this decision was made possible because of Dobbs. The majority opinion in this Alabama case cites the Dobbs decision that the unborn are living human beings, meaning had Dobbs not happened, we wouldn't be here right now. This is the direct result of Donald Trump appointing a Supreme Court that vowed to overturn Roe, and the direct result of a Republican Party that saw their 50-year plan come to fruition. I don't know how else I can say this other than this is exactly what they wanted. And so is, by the way, this IVF decision. Democrats actually introduced a bill specifically to protect IVF called the Right to Build Families Act. That was back in December of 2022, knowing that this was in jeopardy. IVF was in jeopardy because of Dobbs. And that bill was blocked by Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. Before that, there was the Right to Contraception Act. That bill was also blocked, this time by Senator Joni Ernst. So when Republicans claim, whoa, we didn't intend for this to happen, yes, they did. That is quite literally, by definition, what they intended to happen when they blocked a bill that would prevent it from happening. You can't block a bill protecting IVF and then do this whole fainting couch routine when IVF isn't protected. And this goes without saying, but this decision has been an absolute disaster for Republicans, given that now they're interfering in people's ability not just to decide how to have their families, but to have them at all. For a lot of people, IVF is their only option. But these people, these Republican politicians, are so fucking overbearing and extreme that they couldn't help themselves, and now they're on the receiving end of a ton of coverage from people across the political spectrum who are recognizing that there is no end to these efforts by the GOP to insert themselves between families and their doctors. And you can tell, by the way, that they're panicking because all of those Republicans are now suddenly coming out and feigning outrage over this decision. Like Donald Trump, who claimed that he didn't support this decision even though he appointed the Supreme Court that made this possible. Or Mike Johnson, who also came out and said that he doesn't agree with this decision, even though Johnson literally co-sponsored the Life at Conception Act, which, like the Alabama ruling, states that the term human beings includes, quote, all stages of life, including the moment of fertilization, cloning, or other moment at which an individual member of the human species comes into being. And there is no exception for IVF, meaning this bill, sponsored again by Mike Johnson and 125 other Republicans, would result in the exact same thing happening that is happening right now in Alabama. So when I say they're not only opposed to this Alabama ruling, but actively pushing for it to occur nationwide, this is what I mean. Or you have this take by Lindsey Graham.
The last thing we'll do is shut down a fertility clinic to have a child that you desperately want. And the last thing we'll ever do is try to outlaw birth control. So when Hillary Clinton talks about that, that tells me they've run out of things to say about their own agenda. It's BS, and it's not going to work.
The last thing we'll do is shut down a fertility clinic? That is literally what is happening right this second in Alabama. You've got the University of Alabama at Birmingham system that stopped offering fertility treatments. The Alabama Fertility Services stopped. The Center for Reproductive Medicine stopped. Infirmary Health stopped. My God, at this point, if you want to know the truth about what Republicans are doing, just listen to what they say and assume it is the polar opposite. So as far as the GOP is concerned, especially with regard to reproductive health, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. In fact, that applies to this entire bogus notion that the right is pro-life or pro-children or pro-babies. They fall over themselves grandstanding about their moral superiority, and yet they vote against childcare. They vote against early education. They vote against universal pre-K. They vote against the child tax credit. They vote against SNAP, where half the recipients are children. They vote against Medicaid, where, again, half the recipients are children. When Republicans stripped women of their reproductive rights, we read in horror about young girls across the country being assaulted and then being forced to give birth. If you can point me to the part where they actually stand behind this idea of being pro-life or pro-baby or pro-child, I'm all ears. So look, the Alabama Supreme Court is composed entirely of Republicans. There are no Democrats on that court. This is a conservative decision handed down by a conservative court. This is true, pure, unencumbered Republican governance in action. This is what you're left with when Republicans take full control. This is the natural conclusion of a political party whose only guiding principle is forcing their extreme religious views onto the rest of the population. Like, they profess to be these champions of freedom, but they work on a daily basis to strip those freedoms away. And so now, regular Americans who want nothing more than a family of their own can't, because a bunch of religious zealots, a bunch of theocrats, don't know how to let people live their lives without imposing their religious dogma onto them. And I promise you, this is not the end. This is the beginning. This is the warning shot. If Republicans win in November, what you are seeing now isn't a fluke, it is the blueprint, and it'll impact families across the entire country. Here's a preview of my interview with PAC attorney Joe Birkenstock. Donald Trump's PAC spent roughly $50 million on legal expenses in 2023. So first off, does it pose some legal issue for Trump to spend PAC money on his legal fees?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the short answer is it can. And this is in that zone of things that, clients always hate to hear. The answer is it depends. But the only accurate answer here is it depends. It's a combination of what the underlying issues are and also the specific nature of the source of the payment. Campaigns are treated differently than leadership PACs or party committees. So there's a whole kind of morass you have to deal with in terms of sorting out which legal expenses can be paid by which committees for what purposes.
And in terms of the expenses, the legal expenses that were paid by Donald Trump's committees, I mean, he has the Save America PAC, I believe is his principal PAC. Does it pose any issues that he was basically soliciting funds for a political campaign that were then being used to pay his lawyers?
Right. Yeah. This is an old issue, right? I mean, one thing to bear in mind here is that the campaign finance laws that are currently in place were written in the 70s, have been interpreted and changed and kind of modified over many decades. And this issue of personal use, even specifically in terms of legal fees, has been percolating for many of those decades. The starting point is what exactly is the underlying issue that you need legal counsel to address? The law allows you to use campaign funds to cover legal expenses generated by your activities as a candidate or by your activities as an office holder. So when you look at all the various ways that Donald Trump is currently in legal trouble, you have to kind of sift out which ones are for which reasons. Think about the January 6th indictments, right, as one package. Think about the classified documents case as another. Both of those clearly concern his activities as a federal office holder, as president. So those are in a zone where even to the extent the committee that would be paying the fees is a principal campaign committee, those are actually permissible uses because the expenses themselves relate to his activities as an office holder.
As a follow-up to that, if he committed the actions for which he now needs legal counsel while he was in office, sure, but in furtherance of crimes, then is it exempt? Because he wasn't doing this. The actions that he committed for January 6th or stealing classified documents weren't part of his oath of office. And so could the crime fraud exception exempt him from being able to use these fees under that clause?
It's a great question, Brian, and I think it's in a zone of a lot of others where we've never had to confront this before. We've never had a president get indicted for felonies before.
Not too many felonious presidents out there
Exactly.
that can give you precedent.
So, in this way, as in so many ways, like it's brand new turf because in the nearly 250-year-old history of our country, we simply have never had to confront these kinds of circumstances before.
To watch the full interview with Joe Birkenstock, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen to listen to the audio version and, of course, to see more of my content. The subscribe button's on the screen as well.